All right, at this point, we're going to do our best to get our house in order to a certain extent from a visual schematic perspective of how our business operates. And we're going to definitely take the lens of a customer here. So we want to map out the business system in the form of a customer journey, right? So we want to understand what a customer is experiencing and then the different paths and action points and touches that we need to manufacture in our business for a customer to experience, to be able to move through from the top of funnel, becoming aware and getting attracted and then converting all the way through the sales cycle, all the way to closing as a new customer, paying customer, all the way through delivery, all the way through to hopefully recycling with additional referrals or potential incremental revenue from that customer. So we want to map out all of the things that we need to do in our business to be able to support that journey. It's a tall task at first. And if you go and ask 100 entrepreneurs or 10 entrepreneurs, how many of you have a visual schematic of your business system today? The likelihood is not too many are going to raise their hand. And then the next level qualifier is it up to date? When's the last time you updated? Did you update it within the last quarter? And if you ask that, then the likelihood is, not too many people are going to have that hand raised. Why? Because this is kind of like in the weeds. This is the operational stuff that not a lot of folks enjoy doing. However, it's so important because when you're in that situation of optimize, right? So right now we're just still organizing. But as we work through our operating system, as we're running our business, as we're doing our retros, as we're looking at whether or not we're achieving our goals or our outcomes, and we're making these theses of how do we optimize, right, to get better profitability, less processes, simplification. This schematic is a great tool to have to be able to do that, right? So for those reasons and definitely more, we emphasize taking the time, investing the time, intentional time early in your journey to map out your business system, right? Now, if you want to just stop at the revenue engine side, literally like how you're acquiring customers and what the customer gets to the point of acquisition or conversion, that's okay, especially depending on your business model itself, right? Like if you're selling a digital product or something of that nature, that may be enough for you. However, I highly suggest that you do take the effort and the oomph to map out everything, right? Now, the example I'm going to go through today is high level revenue engine side. It's not the entire business system. Didn't want to overcomplicate for a number of reasons. It can get very complicated as you go through the nuances of, accounts receivable, accounts payable, right? Moving things through legal and compliance, right? As you ultimately integrate more departments into your business. However, when we work with middle market companies, this is one of the things that we spend the most time on, to be honest. We'll circulate it through different stakeholders throughout the organization on a departmental basis. We'll make sure that everything's kind of identified. And then the why behind that is because this is an awesome opportunity for us to identify some low-hanging fruit constraints, say that 3 times fast, low-hanging fruit constraints that you could easily potentially remove or elevate and ring fence, right? So the reason why you want to do that is because that's the simplest possible way to improve the business as quickly as possible, both from a customer experience perspective. Again, any friction points that you can take out of the customer journey or the business system schematic itself, the better customer experience typically there is, as long as you're still delivering to the outcomes of that goal or that objective of the business system at that stage. And then also more importantly, or equally as important, perhaps more importantly, the people, right? You're really optimizing. This is an opportunity for you to optimize your business for your people so that they have less processes or simplified processes, or you're sitting and appreciating the things that are currently in their way from getting to the simple, profitable outcomes, right? So for those reasons and probably more, at this stage, we just want to talk through what it would look like to set your business system schematic up. There's not too much of a workshop here because realistically, at this stage of the game, I mean, every business is unique, and this is just intentional time that you're going to need to invest. What we can do is talk through the methodology of like how you can approach doing so. But what we're going to just screen share and teach Train Equipped is more of like a high level, what it could look like. And then again, just more of the justification of the why in terms of why this is so important to do early and often, why it's important to have it and then revisit it so that you can optimize it ideally every quarter. Sometimes this is something that could be done on an annualized basis, but you want to keep this up to date. So, all right, at this point, let's jump on into our operating system. We had just left off at the forecasted goals and OKRs. Now we're going to get into our business system so that we can appreciate it. And we're doing so with the lens of the forecast goals and OKRs that we just set. Meaning if we don't have a business system or we don't have a schematic that helps us accomplish those things, we're not going to accomplish them, right? So it's really important that, you're doing this systematically and you're doing this, horse in front of cart. And that as you're doing it and you're working through, you're appreciating, you're revisiting, you're appreciating and you're respecting the work that you've already done and you're carrying that good work forward. So this would be a great place to carry that work forward because what we're trying to build for is how we're achieving those goals. Now, a simple way like on our business system schematic, all we did here was I embedded an image. We use Miro. So there's you could use Figma, you could use Miro. There's tons of little design mapping platforms out there. I've been using Miro as of late. So that's what this is. It's just a screenshot from a Miro board. We could probably link at a later date or maybe in the bootcamp itself to some out of the box schematics that you could use. But you're going to have a schematic. You're going to work through it in the Miro board. Actually, I'll link to this template so that you guys can actually just adopt this and use this and tweak it, have a working framework. But then you're going to want to get down to the team alignment, who's doing what, how type of thing. What are we jointly focused on? What are our commitments? What resources do we have? And what risks do we need to be aware of? Again, this is high level business system planning, right? This isn't designed to be, some sort of crazy way to optimize the business from some sort of specific type of methodology or anything like that. This is just high level appreciation. If you don't know what it is, then you can't fix anything type of thing, right? So this is just literally inventory of the parts. I like to think of this as almost like a puzzle, right? When you build a puzzle, you're opening up a box, you flip out all the puzzle pieces. One of the first things that I like to do is to look at the front of the box. What's the picture of this puzzle that we're putting together? I like to start there. And then usually the second thing would be flip over all the pieces. And then maybe the third thing would be start to find the corners and then work your way in. This is just us kind of looking at the box, right? What is the picture? That was probably, more of our last exercise or earlier exercise being, forecast goals and OKRs. That's kind of the picture that we're building, the box. This is kind of us now flipping over the pieces, right? We're in the nitty gritty. This is the meat and potatoes of the business, but it is realistically also just fairly high level. So in order to get a understanding, realign, I typically restart with super simple alignment, right? So what is the primary goal we're looking to achieve? You could just carry these things forward from your last exercise. I just like to have it here so you could reference you could go back to your operating system is what I'm saying, and you can reference your forecast goals and OKRs. So you can reference this stuff that you've already worked on and you can bring it forward and apply it here, right? Keep it simple. Right? I usually work inside that Miro board. So this is usually a working model, but this is just a reminder, a refresher of our why, right? Our leading why, that North Star that we're following. Always keep it in your mind. The mind is such a powerful thing, especially even on a subconscious level. just subconsciously reminding ourselves what we're doing. It allows us to solve problems, whether or not we even know that we're doing it. So it's just like really important. It's kind of like looking at the cover of the puzzle, right, that you're building. And then the second part of it is really just going to be documentation. So what you're going to want to document is like exactly what's happening today. And then at a later date, right, once we do all this stuff, later date of the process, we're going to revisit this stuff and then start to optimize. So again, like right now, we're looking at that cover of the box of the puzzle, looking at the picture, and we're flipping the pieces. That's all we're doing now. At a later date, we're going to come back and we're going to start building that puzzle, build a better picture of tomorrow in a sense and optimize the business system. But first, everything starts somewhere, and first we're just laying the foundation. So like, why is the goal, right? Who do you need to attract in order to achieve it? Why would they want to participate? This is pretty important. You go back to your lean canvas for this stuff, right? So between your lean canvas and the forecast strategy and OKR, you'll have all of your answers that you need because you've already invested intentional time to get to those answers, right? So you're going to understand, like remind yourself where you're at with the business, and then you're going to start to build your revenue. This is a revenue engine, but realistically, you can map this through all the way through the entire business system, again, by just following the path of a customer, right? So up top here, we have all of the marketing activity. This is all the ways in which our ideal customer becomes aware that the brand exists and that we have a solution to their problem, right? So typically you'll see this maybe as a funnel, right? Other videos that we do will show the funnel. I just use this general like kind of block here because realistically all of these things are happening. Because all of these things are happening from a marketing perspective, it's capturing that awareness and attention of the customer, right? You're bringing them through the stages of the marketing cycle, right? Get them aware, get them engaged, get them converted. At some point, you're going to convert, and you're going to convert when the person when the ideal customer perspective, persona, wants to learn more about what solutions you're providing. So that's typically going to take place at like the conversion point. That would be something like a website, right? So you have a website so that you can educate, convert customers, right? Get them to raise their hand that they're interested. More often than not, it's going to be a landing page, which is the same as a website, only designed to really specifically speak to the problem solution of that specific type of customer that lands on that page, and then convert them to a next step action, right? Oftentimes the next step action is book a call or watch a video or schedule, attend a webinar, right? Some sort of engaged action, right? And then typically you're going to have a form. You're going to want to have a form so that you can, capture the awareness of the person who's coming in. An example of this, I could go to Bootstrapper Capital, and let's just say somebody wants performance capital. Boom, right here. This would be a landing page example, right, for somebody to use, right? So apply for a performance-based capital, become a portfolio company. Each one of these realistically is a great example of this. Sell your business is the same. We buy simple, bootstrap businesses. You can schedule your call. That's your action that we want you to take. Right here is a form for you to submit a simple application. You submit this form, it then goes to a calendar as well as the onboarding into the orientation. It enters everything into our HubSpot account so we can then trigger it and start to work, leads through our business system. Right? So these are examples here. Once somebody comes in and they convert, they want to be able to go through the sales experience, right? They want to see it or experience it, right? That's the next step that typically folks are asking for. Okay, you say you can do it. You've captured my interest off of, a big promise or an offer. Now let me see it and experience it. Now here, typically in a business system, you'll have two steps. You could either go one step being a high, touch type of experience, or you could go a low touch type of experience. We've probably all experienced them both. High touch type of experience would be a person, typically a sales process. This is typically for high ticket or high dollar sales. There's different formulas where you could back into whether or not it makes sense for you to be doing high touch or low touch. But I genuinely like to leverage either 10,000 as the primary mark, sometimes 30,000. It depends on your market and how much volume and velocity you can support, because you need to back into a quota that can support the headcount, the salesperson, right, to make it a justifiable job. But typically, from my personal perspective, anything less than 10 could be otherwise more of like a low touch type of process. Doesn't mean you don't have a person taking calls, but you would augment the sales process. It wouldn't be a high touch, similar to that of like an enterprise sales process where you're working somebody through stages. You would just maybe answer some questions and help facilitate, the person ultimately signing up. Anything under 5,000, I highly suggest that you just go pure low touch. The economics just aren't necessarily there to support the headcount. If you're earlier in your business's life cycle, that's okay. You could maybe justify that because you're also learning and you're optimizing and there's other things. I also like to use high touch tied to that learning stage. When we get into a business, many times what we'll do, you could learn faster. You could learn through two things. So you could learn through data. You could pay attention to data. So you could have somebody coming through a funnel, conversion points. You could pay attention to who's clicking on what in terms of keyword or interest from the top of the funnel. So where's the interest lie in the market? You can then pay attention to landing page, who's converting into what messages. So what is resonating the most to get to the next point? Like, where are you actually putting finger on pain and problem to solution, and it's connecting, right? So that's the next point that you could, and then through the sales process itself, right? In the sales process itself, you're really paying attention to conversion ratios, and you can pay attention to drop-off points, right? That being said, as you're working through it, I will say we're taking on a new portfolio company, or say we're in an advisory relationship or something of that nature. I personally, especially when it's my capital that I'm putting to work, I tend to always mix the two here. So I'll always look to optimize. I always look to optimize around low touch as much as possible, because you can even low touch optimize for a high ticket for like an enterprise value contract. Now you would augment and you could optimize for a conversion point, low touch conversion, but you would want to augment it to a high touch onboarding and success experience, right? So you're not going to completely get rid of the human experience, but you could potentially augment where you're allocating resources less away from sales, more away into support and retention, and get a better lifetime value of your customer. But that being said, I always try to optimize for a low touch conversion, regardless of price, right? Just optimize for like funnel conversion and performance. And then usually across the board, when you first get started, or when I first get started into a project or portfolio or any sort of engagement, I'll typically always plug in high touch, even if the price point doesn't justify high touch. Why? Because you can expedite your learnings and your optimization by having that human factor, by having the human capital at play here. You can learn things better, faster, and you can have a better communication loop where you're getting actual feedback from the market. You're talking to people and they're asking specific questions. You're documenting the questions that they're asking, right? You're paying attention to the trends. You're paying attention to what's being said when folks are moving forward, where the interest lies, where the problem solution really meets. And then you can take all of that feedback and then you can optimize it into your copy, right? You could answer questions through things like FAQs. You could program chatbots. You can create copy and paragraphs that are enriched. You create blog posts, all of these things that support the sales process to support a more frictionless low touch conversion, right? So you could take all of these things that you're learning, think of it almost like a focus group, right? By adopting or building around a high touch sales process, even if it doesn't justify it at first, it's almost like you're running a focus group with your leads. So as you have your leads coming through the top of funnel here, because you got good marketing activity, targeting the right types of keywords, the right types of problem solutions, you're engaging the right audience, they're coming through, they go through your landing page, you can then leverage that, right? Low touch typically will drop right through and drop down over here into looking for like a proposal or looking for, just pay, right? Put in my credit card information so I can get access type of thing. Things that support an ROI of a decision, right? High touch will typically go through more of a process, a formal process, right? So next, you're going to want to remove the risk from the purchase decision. So as people are like going through and they're experiencing this stuff, they've yet to make the trigger. They've yet to pull the trigger. They've yet to make their decision of I'm going to buy. So they're just working through these stages. Next stage that I'm a customer, if I'm a customer, again, we're taking the customer's perspective here when we're building this stuff. It's like, I don't know if this is the right decision. So the customer, you need to acknowledge the customer is going to go out and they're going to do things like market research. They want to look at case studies, success stories, testimonials, right? They're going to look at review sites, G2, etc. for social proof, Trustpilot, all of this stuff. So you're going to want to make sure that stuff's available, readily accessible. You're going to use it again later in your sales process. So this is kind of like a low touch again, like just make sure it's there because you know that people are naturally doing it regardless. Then they're going to acknowledge whether or not they have a sense of urgency. Now, if I'm a customer, potential customer going through this process, a lead, and I don't have a sense of urgency, I'm not going to buy, right? If I don't have a need to buy, I'm not going to buy. So you can't force buyers, right? You can help educate a person through the sales process and help facilitate them become buyers, help them identify the fact that they truly do have a need and help them move forward. But if somebody's like, I don't need this, they're not going to buy this, right? So at that stage, they would just say no, they would get out of it, and you would put them back into your lead nurturing, right? You're going to want to cycle them back through. You're going to have something that, re-engages them, re-educates them, builds a deeper relationship over time, etc. Now, if they do have that sense of urgency and they want to solve that problem, then they're likely, again, being a good consumer, especially nowadays, going to go look for other solutions. So you should just acknowledge that, right? And make sure that you're building that into your system. You're building it into the materials you're building. You should just know, like, long gone are the days where customers don't have a choice. Customers have infinite choices nowadays. So they're going to go look at other solutions out there and do a compare and contrast. If they make it through and they're still considering, then they're gonna stick with your, then they want to ultimately make sure that your solution is the best solution, right? So now they're aware that other solutions are out there, but they're still deciding to move forward. They just want to make sure that yours is best. That's when you come back in with your sales materials, again, those supporting materials. Maybe they didn't actively go and find this stuff before. Now you're very proactively feeding it to them. And maybe you've done that ever since, at these early stages through email drips and things of that nature. This is when you're getting on the call. What questions may you have? How can we make this more comfortable of a decision for you? Here's some case studies. Here's this and this person. Here's us in these review sites, right? You want to take away the freedom for somebody to say no, right? Take the freedom to decide away from the customer, and the likelihood is they'll go with a yes decision if it's the right decision. So your job is to make sure that it's the right decision by building the best possible business you can, and then be proactive into all these things, which are reasons why maybe somebody wouldn't go with you, right? Now they're going to continue to move forward. If no, then you go back through the lead nurturing, right? Take them, they stick with your solution. If no, go to lead nurturing. If yes, then they're going to look for, at this stage of the game, they've made it this far, they're pretty sure they're going to move forward with you. So they want a path to be able to do it, right? You got to be able to provide them with a proposal or some sort of framework that can get them to the decision to take the next step. Sometimes it's an ROI, like an analysis of, if it's a high ticket, especially if it's a higher ticket sale, what's the justification for doing this? If it's lower, then you just want to take the friction out, take less friction, less things in the way, just give the person the opportunity to say yes right away. Again, another reason why I also try to build for both. If somebody wants to move forward, don't be in their way with a heavy sales process. Just let them say yes fast, right? Because they already know that maybe they've already done all of this stuff and they're deeper in the process than you know. So you should always have an ability for them to move yes, and that's why we did that earlier, right? At this point, they decided that they are ready to go forward. You got the proposal. Now they're going to bring in other stakeholders. If it's like an enterprise play or a higher ticket sale or there's a justification that needs to be made, a business case justification, then typically they're going to bring in other people because they don't want to, they don't want to get fired, or they don't want to look bad, or they don't want to be embarrassed, amongst their spouse or, peer group or whatever the case is. So then they're going to bring folks in, and they're just going to look to get that group approval, that group buy-in. That's when you're going to leverage that person who you just worked and invested all this time as the champion in that account, help them champion you, help them understand who the other people are involved, so that you can then, break in, win the relationships, get the rapport, and move things forward. If they're, at that stage, if it's a heavy, depending on what the situation is, like for us, we position a safer, right? So simple agreement for future exit revenue repayment. Sometimes legal gets involved, right? If you're doing enterprise software sales or whatever the case may be, oftentimes legal will get involved, and they want to review everything. More enterprise the contract, typically the more that this is the case. You get past legal, now you're going to go to the final approval. They have the buy-in, right? So you wanted to make sure that budget was already available. If they have budget and they have approval, everything works out from at this stage. Now they decide to sign. You just got yourself a new client. Now it's time for onboarding. Onboarding is all about time to value, right? If you want to reduce churn, if you want to maximize the retention and lifetime value of your customer, how much a customer is worth over the longest period of time, then you're going to focus here on time to value, meaning you're going to want to get somebody to the value that they want that they paid for, the problem that they were solving. You're going to want to solve that problem for them as fast as possible, or get them the tools and resources, what they acquired, what they just purchased, to be able to get to that problem as fast as possible. So if you can optimize around time to value, this is why also earlier in this workshop, I mentioned you may want to augment your workforce. If you're dealing with limited resources, being capital and people, you may want to augment your process from less of a high touch sales process to more of a low touch sales process, and more of a high touch onboarding customer success. Because really the money's made in the long term over retention and getting people to value. For example, if you have a heavy sales process and you have expenses that go into that sales process, and you're covering salaries and you're covering commissions, and you have to cover all of these leads and the customer acquisition costs, right? If you look at your all-in customer acquisition costs, and let's just use an example, and you're a SaaS company, and software as a service, you're on a recurring revenue stream where you get paid every month, and you realize that it's going to take you 6 months of repayment or 12 months of repayment to even break even off of covering that customer acquisition cost, because everything was so expensive. It was so expensive to get the lead. It was so expensive to close the lead. And then your onboarding process, your customers aren't getting good time to value, and they leave you after 3 months because they're like, man, I'm not sticking around for 12. You just lost money, right? You just lost money investing all that money on the sales side, and instead of reshifting and allocating here to recoup the money that you need to get to profitability. So if you're a bootstrapper, especially if you're a bootstrapper, I would reallocate and reassociate and optimize here first, and then move your way back up. If you're more venture-backed and you have a ton of resources, growth may be the only metric you care about, then you could look at these things. But over a long enough period of time, everybody needs to care about retention. And then the way that you drive down customer acquisition costs is through actually delivering value, and then people becoming your referrals and your testimonials, right? A referred customer is the cheapest customer you'll ever get. Let your customers walk you into more customers. That's one of the best ways to reduce your customer acquisition costs, right? On top of that, a testimonial, if you get a testimonial for a customer, it's going to improve your sales materials through your sales process, which will help you get to less friction in the sales process and get to better velocity in your pipeline, faster, moving folks through faster, right? So you got MQL, which is a marketing qualified lead at this stage of the game, right? So you got leads, like people that are kind of aware of you. You got subscribers, people that they bought in a little bit. You got MQLs, people that have shown a little bit of attention and they're interested. You got SQLs, people that are actually qualified to buy. Then you got customers, right? And then hopefully at some stage of your game, you got advocates. Now, this is a top-down system here. You could also build it left to right as a bow tie, right? More traditionally speaking, it's probably actually closer to a bow tie. The schematics tend to be better and easier to follow when you build them from top to down, but you could build it both ways. This is just the revenue engine, right? So as you're working through your business, you can expand on this. Just simply compartmentalize off and start to show the different business units, the different business functions, right? Show what marketing's doing, show what sales is doing, show what onboarding's doing, customer success is doing, show what operations is doing, show what finance is doing, show what your legal and compliance is doing, show what IT and tech is doing, right? Because everybody has a part to play in your business system. And if they don't, they shouldn't exist, right? So again, this is a great way to demonstrate all of these moving various parts of your business and justification for the roles, responsibilities, and processes. After you do all of this stuff, this also becomes a really clean way of having conversations around constraints and saying, hey, where in the sales process are we seeing, the highest fall off, right? If you're talking to your sales team, right? What's going on where people are falling off? What stage, in our pipeline? And then you can look at that and say, all right, well, is it because this, our demos, is it because we're not capturing enough qualified leads? Are they unqualified? Is it because, our webinar isn't really communicating the right information, or sales demo isn't capturing the right information? We're not following the right process. Is it because we're not making this information accessible that they need early in the process, so they ghost us? Like, what's going on? And then you can just ask, and then you can optimize, right? So the simple deliverables that tend to come off of this, and again, this is just the revenue engine. You got your messaging, right? Really important. The who, the what, and the why of the customer. That's all the things over here. Again, you've already done this, but this is all like great work, because again, taking this work, you're going to carry this forward, and then you're going to drive this into the strategize section, and you're going to use this to start to develop and deliver your go-to-market strategies, right? So all this is pretty important. You're going to have your conversation points in terms of the capture points of the journey. You're going to have either your high touch or your low touch process, or ideally both, right? In terms of like capturing and driving the sale forward, the leads forward. You're going to have all of your supporting materials to be able to support that sales process, right? You're going to have your agreements that you need for people to sign and actually become customers, your ability to collect payments, all of that stuff's going to be done, and your conversion points, right? If you have all of this basic stuff, this is the simplest, most minimal viable way that you could be in business, right? You may not need all of these things, to be honest. So you could probably simplify from here, but this is a pretty simple revenue engine. This is a great place to start. And then again, I would highly suggest, I didn't do it here, so I'm not going to talk through it in this workshop, but you get the point. You get the gist of it. You're just literally following the customer journey. You're following the customer experience, and then you're mapping out who's doing what, how, right? And it's a great way for you to just optimize, or be in a situation where you can then optimize later in the process. All right, so that is your business system schematics. Take some time, leverage our Miro boards, or leverage the schematics we already have in place. Build on top of it. Just truly, genuinely, just follow your process, follow your business, follow how your customers are moving through your system. It doesn't necessarily have to look like this, right? Honestly, I could probably throw out 3, 4, 5 different examples that pretty much cover the same thing, look different. This is just the thing this is the easiest way to condense and consolidate this from a visual schematic perspective to get it all on one page, right? So for that reason, that's a big why. Like, this could look way different. You could literally have a journey from each of these funnels. So like, you could truly have like top of funnel drivers, and you could follow your funnels through different conversion paths, right? There's a number of different ways you can do it. My job here, my goal here was to communicate the why behind why you're doing this, right? And then more importantly, like the thought process in terms of how you could take what we did and then do it for yourself, right? Hopefully this works out, and we look forward to being able to see and visualize your customer journeys. And then at a later stage in these boot camps, we're going to revisit this stuff and we're going to optimize appropriately.